Okay, so I think we can begin. Let's wait just a little second. Okay, let's get her up and running. So, my dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues, I'm very happy to welcome everyone at the webinar of the European Platform for Democratic Elections, EPDE, which we have devoted to so-called presidential elections in the country of Belarus. The webinar is something we're doing together with our colleagues from the Vyasna Human Rights Center, as well as the Helsinki Committee. My name is Adam Slang, and I am the project manager at the EPDE. And on this very day, we wish to talk to you about what has already become a very typical ritual. Sorry for the seventh time that we are observing it, seventh time in a row. This ritual process of electing, rather choosing, or rather affirming Lukashenka as president. And President is Lukashenka, well, you know what things are like. Everything seems rather dark. Elections in Belarus are going in the atmosphere, as we all know, fear and deep pressure. There's 1,200 people who are remaining political prisoners amongst them. Among them, there are basically all the opposition politicians that could fight against Lukashenko. They are either out of the country or imprisoned. Over the last 3 years, almost 2,000 organizations were closed down, and thousands of people were forced to leave the country, trying to save themselves from being persecution in countries. Our colleagues have been found for over 3 years. Colleagues from Vyasna organization, which is Alies Bialacki, Vladimir Lapkovich, Valentin Stepanovich, Marta Rabkova, as well as Alice Kapuk. They were given from 7 to almost 15 years imprisonment for the work for human rights defense and for free elections. These elections will be held, and I'm using this issue in order to simplify our language. False elections, alleged elections, without any international observation. The ones who are observing the process are the ones loyal to Minsk and Moscow, and independents, including local observers or observers as such, were not given any access. Therefore, today, we are going to take a look at how this campaign is going and what is it we can expect once all of this comes to an end. I mean, we'll begin our conversation. Well, if anyone has any kind of questions, please do write them in the chat. We have translation, and we have decided to speak today on Russian and English. We have quite a good interpretation into English. Our colleagues Michał and Tomasz are doing the job of translating. They already are. Thanks a lot for that. And the questions can be asked either in chat or after the introduction given by our colleagues. You can also ask questions in audio, I suppose. Well, let us then begin together with us. As of this day, we have Dmitry Chernykh. Dmitry is an expert in the area of human rights defenders. As of now, he is on the Belarusian Helsinki Committee. He has over 15 years experience of legal practice of election observation on the national and international levels. Starting 2008, he's been working as an analyst, a legal expert, and coordinator to observe elections in Belarus within the Human Rights Observer Initiatives for Free and Fair Elections. He is a co-author of an analytical work, and he also participates in numerous initiatives of development of human rights and observation initiatives. We also have with us Pavel Sapielka, who, starting from earlier 90s, been an advocate and human rights defender on criminal cases of activists in Belarus, including Pavel Severica, Andrei Yasnikov, Pavel Vinogradov, as well as Nikolai Kovish, as well as others. Starting 2011, he's been a legal expert in Vyasna, and starting 2021, he used to be the member of the temporary ruling organ of the Vyasna. Pavel is also an author of a number of lectures on issues being held in places of detention in Belarus, on elections, observation of standards of justice and freedom. And in 2012, we have to confirm, he was also given the law of citizen of Europe in the area of human rights. We are also joined a bit later by Aliaksandr Shlik. Well, Alexander will be mentioned a bit later on. And I also asked a colleague of ours, Darina Starina, to give us a brief talk on the general observation of international area as it will be held in those elections. So thank you very much, Darina, for having found the time to be here with us. So let us commence with Dima, perhaps very briefly, about the local observations about the initiatives of human rights defenders for free elections. If you could say how we could work in such conditions, and what are the methods, what are the instruments that you are using to collect and analyze information? Thank you. Dima. Thank you very much, Adam. Good day to everyone. Thank you for having joined us. Well, immediately, let me say that our campaign of human rights defenders for free election from 2008, we've been joining two human rights organizations in Belarus, the Belarus National Community and the Vyasna Center. And each of our campaigns had the goal of assessing the rights and freedoms in the electoral campaign versus the standards and the constitution of the country. As of now, we have no possibility, literally, to continue our work and direct observers, as we used to accredit them in the commissions. Unfortunately, that was mentioned by Pavel, a colleague of mine, quite sadly, all the space for civil participation is all but clear. There's no political activities, no opposition virtually. So as of today, it is all but impossible to observe elections or to have any independent observations. Therefore, at the very time, it is important to gather information on how the process was going. Again, elections, well, elections are used here in all of our reports with a disclaimer. So we always explain to our auditorium and to the people in Belarus, those who are interested in elections, that this campaign that is going on, I mean, it shouldn't be called elections as such. It is only an electoral procedure where you can actually realize your rights to execute your execution, as well as gathering freedom. Unfortunately, these are all but impossible to be realized in Belarus. Therefore, both the elections cannot be called elections as such, as it is understood in democratic countries. At the very same time, as I told you, it is important to observe this particular process which is going on. It is important to fixate those violations that were held and to gather information about the extent to which the things that are going on can be called elections as such, which is in line with the standards and the Constitution. Therefore, we have decided to organize our experts' mission, which gathers information based on public data sources, based on information that is gathered by various types of electoral bodies and persons in Belarus. I mean, it is also important from the point of information for us. It is important that we understand how the actual campaign is progressing on the ground. Therefore, sources in Belarus are also important for our campaign. Now, within the frameworks of this particular campaign, we have a group of analysts who gather information, who collect information that we get, and who prepare specific accounts. The campaign consists of a number of stages. The first of them is to formulate the territorial commissions. Then we have registration of candidates, of initiative groups, then of the candidates. Then we have the agitation process, registration and the formulation of specific local ground committees, and voting as well as vote count. Immediately, I have to tell you that insofar as we have no observers, we have no possibility to direct them, so we don't have any type of monitoring on the voting process. It is also important to be understood, okay? At the same time, we gather information on the violations happening in this voting. It is happening as we speak, and we fixate. Well, I'll mention that a little bit later after Pavel has spoken of the general background against which these elections are held. And, well, let me take a pause and speak over to Pavel, who will tell you of the general situation in the country in these elections and what is going on. Then I will come back with a standard that pertains to all of those stages. Well, if I may, Dima, just very briefly to interrupt you. Thank you very much indeed for the description. It is important that we understand in what conditions we are dealing, how we can work in general, and what methods we can use in this particular area. We have to add, moreover, that Belarusian Helsinki Committee and Vyasna are organizations which founded the EPDE, and from 2028 we together have been working and attempting to jointly conduct this campaign, including information into the international structures about what is apparently going on in Belarus. What pertains to international structures, I mean, we invited Darina today so that she would tell us from the other side of what the international observation is. So we'll start our conversation with Pavel. Let us listen into what we saw once we tried to follow the general output of observations in Belarus, starting this country. As we understood, Kipchen didn't want to be an observer because he was invited too late, and basically ODIHR couldn't be used in such conditions. Well, what we saw will be mentioned about Darina right now. Darina, over to you. Hello, I'd like to tell you all, just as Adam already mentioned, that independent observers were not invited. However, who was invited, as we understood, we call them fake observers. Well, these are those observers which most often are related to specific organizations or who were invited over by the Belarusian or Russian authorities. We have this methodics of monitoring them when they are invited. We understand that approximately 360 of the so-called fake observers will actually be observing, at least they will be invited into Belarus. And on one of the sites, we have managed to find this number. There will be a vast majority of them coming in from the Russian Society of Independent States, from the Shanghai Organization of Cooperation. And then naturally, there are the so-called independent observers, the one that we also expect that are going to come from the Western countries, and there will be approximately, well, there is no specifics for that, but we expect that will be a large number of these. Then we also have knowledge that there were also journalists invited for the so-called elections. Therefore, we already had a major campaign before the elections, and we sent some 40 letters to various electoral commissions of the Western democratic countries. We already told them that they might get such an invitation from Belarus to observe the elections. Therefore, we have written some 80 or more journalists. Also, not all of them, but some were given information that they got this type of invitation, and they should understand that these so-called observers are not independents. Once they give their interviews or once they try and give some assessments on the election, they should understand these are the so-called fake observers. After the elections, we are planning that these reports be published on those that we found so that we can observe them in the Belarusian mass media, and we will also be putting them forward into our database of fakeobserver.org. If you're interested in our methods and our work, then please do enter our website, where you'll be happy to share in the chat. If you have any specific questions about our work related to these fake observers, then please do address us. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Darina. Thank you very much for this very brief observation. And we do see that, well, the authorities of Belarus are deeply interested. Basically, the first, perhaps, for the second time that we see such a clear interest in the legitimization of elections in this country, so as to invite those fake observers who then present it all in the Belarusian mass media and the international area as a very good democratic process. Pavel, over to you. Dima did mention that we can already see, and we know that in Belarus, the vote happens for like 6 days. That was also somewhere midterm, that we haven't finished the third day of the vote. I mean, what do you think? What is the difference between this campaign and the previous ones? Who is it that takes part in it, couldn't take part in it, and why? Well, generally, it needs to be mentioned that we haven't had a campaign so far that would be so strongly dependent on the context and the situation as such in the country. And first of all, on the condition with the level of politically motivated repressions, including criminal, administrative. The issue of context, undoubtedly, is always the one that we faced. And we've never, after 1994, managed to see an actual election in Belarus. Every time these elections were turned into some conditions, there were elections where during the elections there were political prisoners in the country. There were those elections where the pretendants to the presidential post after the elections were sent directly to prisons. We also had elections which concluded in mass protests, but we've never, ever had a situation so dire on literally all vectors of general political life in order to collect the electoral vote and to pick the 2014-2015 when we tried to approach it, and as a result, we tried to address those political situation issues in 2014. That was the report of the Vyasna Center published on our website, 1996, and we have given quite a lot of attention to, first of all, the violation of human rights, as you understand, and it's very difficult to general ideas that would not be violated by Belarus. Well, when we mention elections, so first of all, that's the right to express your own opinion, where we mentioned that humans who did express their opinion are right now subjected to systematic, broadly understood repressions, criminal, administratives. And if we mention this capacity, last year courts held verdicts against over 1,000 people. These are only the ones that we know. Naturally, there were many, many more of these, and more of those than last year on political motives we never, ever had in Belarus. I mean, that was the pure peak. But topmost repressions, the same pertains to administrative issues. More administrative issues were only seen in the 2020 when processes were held. And that is only based on the already known issues, and we understand that the real numbers can be even higher than this level that was accorded for 2020. When we mention elections, we should understand that the country needs to have its freedom of activity for parties, for organizations. However, in 2024, all the parties, well, not all of them, 12 out of 15 parties, including all opposition parties, were liquidated, and now the political landscape in Belarus is very much reminiscent of Eastern Europe, of the Soviet Union times, where even though we formally have multi-party system, we after all have only those parties which are loyal to the authorities. Right now in Belarus, we have 4 loyal parties, all of them subject to the authorities, whereas basically those parties, well, their activity is barely visible on the general political field. In Belarus, we don't have even a single registered human rights organization which actually deals with defending human rights per se. On all of that has this very much direct destructive influence on the creation of one's electoral rights in Belarus starting 2022. We haven't had even a single allowed general political mass event, not a single, an action which would not conclude in sort of a negative conclusions for its participants. The last, more or less free gathering in Belarus was held some 5 years ago, the 30th June 2022. So basically, it was when there were 3 staffs of opposition candidates for the president of Belarus connecting their own people. I think I will stop on that. And If we are speaking here of the situation of Belarus, I would first of all
First
call
of all, if
those
we're
which
talking about
have
the
not
situation in
potentially
Belarus,
become
I'm just
aware
talking
of what the
to those
political
who
landscape is,
don't
of what the political
realize what
repressions
the political
are in opposition with this
landscape looks
state
like in
now,
Belarus, or
which is
the
presented by the
oppression.
human rights defenders. We
And
should remember that
have
the
to
elections
remember that
right
the
now
elections are being held against the backdrop that
are held with almost 56
1,256
political
political
prisoners
prisoners
being found
are being in
in
prison
prisons and in
or
penal colonies,
colonies. Practically
that
all
basically
the
all
active
the active
participants
participants of
of electoral
electoral campaigns
campaigns,
of
the electoral campaign of
2020
2020,
are
are
again,
again
all
in
of them,
prison,
found in
in
penal
jail,
colonies and
or have
prisons
been
or have
through
gone through
prisons and
these
colonies right
and
now,
are
are
right
being
now found
strictly
under
supervised,
the
under strict
very strict
supervision.
supervision.
And
And
when
one
we present our conclusions from the observation of those elections, they will be much more defined when it comes to electoral procedures. Thank you very much, Pavel. Dima. So the same question again. So we might just add to this why the preliminary elections, why not half a year? Why they are being held right now? Why not half a year earlier or half a year later? And who's actually running for president other than Aliaksandr Lukashenko? Thank you, Adam, for what you said. Because indeed, the Belarusian legislation is formed in such a way that elections can be held at any time. Indeed, the most important is that they should not be held later than some term. So actually, it should be until the expiration of the powers of the incumbent. So actually, the point is that authorities, well, it hasn't been once in the history of Belarus that the elections were being run before the term. This time it was half a year earlier. We expected the campaign to be launched in summer, at the beginning of summer, but the authorities decided to put it half a year earlier. Why that's the case, I won't be speculating that. I just want to say that the legislation enables the manipulation of those terms for political reasons, which has also been done. When it comes to our fundamental observations that we have made, let me just tell you about the stages, and you can find more details on our website, elections2025.org. There are different reports as well as news that we prepared based on the information that we find on any irregularities. When it comes to the stage of forming electoral commissions, we're talking about the poll stations and regional stations. This has shown the full control of central authorities on the formulation, on the establishment of those committees. So this shows actually, when it comes to the involvement of the society in the process, formally, these committees are being formed by different civic society organizations, TUs, and so on. But actually, you can see that this has been done based on the production principles. So, for instance, if we have the members of a committee in a school are actually teachers, and the head of a committee is the headmaster. The same can be said about different plants and companies. So formally, they are being formed by some entities. So on paper, it looks as though the civic society is involved. Indeed, these are teachers who get the governmental pay. So this is actually the practice that has been formed. Well, that was formed a long time ago, and it shows that the absence of possibilities of being involved in the process for representatives of the opposition, that the process is absolutely controlled and absolutely foreseeable. So if some political scientists might say that, for instance, if the political parties indeed that put forward their candidates, mostly representatives of political parties take part in the elections, representatives of the Communist Party, Lib Dem Party, and so on and so forth. Those parties don't put their representatives in an active way in electoral committees. In democratic countries, those political parties try to put forward their candidates for the committees to make sure that the procedures are observed. Unfortunately, in our case, it's different. So we can observe that there is an unnatural way of formulating the committees and the involvement of political parties in the process. So you can say that the basic role of political parties is just to ensure the legitimacy of formulation of electoral committees in the entire process of the so-called elections. So we can also observe the role of trade unions that have also received 15% of places in polling stations, which shows their importance and the creation of a picture of a democratic countries. Most electoral committee members are members of professional organizations, so it actually shows on paper that ostensibly the elections are being independent. And when it comes to political parties or social organizations, actually their involvement in these elections is fully excluded. When it comes to the registration of candidates, the fact that we can observe the violations of principles of transparency, the evaluation of potential candidates. Well, the person running for president should collect 100,000 signatures to be registered as a person running for president. That process took about a month, but the verification of the processes was being done so quickly that it actually arouses some doubts when it comes to the transparency of the procedure. Indeed, the signatures and their verification also took a long time. That was a way of manipulating. So if authorities thought that it was good to register a candidate, they just turned a blind eye to the fact that the candidate did not collect enough signatures. If they thought that was the wrong candidate, then they just questioned some of the signatures, even if they were all right. So we can just obviously see that it's a matter of choice. When it comes to the collection of signatures, we also saw some pressure when it comes to political pressure on the collection of signatures to support the head of the state, Lukashenko. Indeed, there were not so many announcements. People were afraid to talk about it, but indeed we observed cases where people were made to affix their signatures. Sometimes they were threatened by authorities that if you don't, that was before. And right now, there were no threats. It's enough just to say you have to put your signature there, everybody understands what it's all about. That's why the authorities have collected a huge number of signatures to support Lukashenko, and this is also intended to show the universal support for Lukashenko's policies. And the media, when it comes to the candidates, well, actually, there have been 5 people, and all of them have been registered as candidates. That's a unique case. So far, it has never been the case that all the people who have collected the signatures have been registered as candidates successfully. As regards the stage of campaigning, actually, the campaigning stage is a public process when you can see the campaigning everywhere, where there are meetings, rallies. We haven't observed anything like that. It was the campaign, the campaigning was so quiet, I don't know even what to call it. So it was not a non-campaigning campaign. So the authorities were focused on running a number of meetings by using administrative resources when people were actually made to attend those meetings during their working hours and to listen about how to properly or how good Lukashenko is at governing the country and how important it is to ensure stability. So actually, these were the narratives presented in such meetings. So, and the most important thing is that the candidates that participate in the fight or in running for president also talk about how good Lukashenko is doing. He does everything in the right way. So that's a nonsense from the journalist's point of view or experts. When counter candidates that are running for the same function are actually all focused on showing how right the policy is performed by the incumbent. So I'm almost finished. So let me just tell you about. We'll come back to the earlier time. Yeah, exactly. But I'd like to tell you about it because Alex has joined us. Alex Schlick. Alex, can you hear us? See us? Yes, I'm with you. I'm in contact. I can. Well, you probably cannot see me, but I can hear you. Okay, Alex. We were talking actually about the space for elections. So let me just tell you briefly that Alex worked for over 10 years at the ODIHR, OSCE, from 2016 to 21. Well, exactly during the time of the latest presidential elections in Belarus, he was the head of the department. Right now, he's the special envoy of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. So if you could just tell us, we're talking about this special space, protected space. Why do you think should we have elections in the first place to legitimize the authority? So why does Lukashenko even need this ritual?
Well, apparently I got the most political question as of today. I'm an expert on elections, and political issues are usually delegated to political analysts. But once the question is here, why shouldn't I answer it? Okay, so I think that these elections are held because they have to be held. First of all, we know that dictatorships are always based, or try to be based, on the letter of law, not on the spirit. If the letter of the law says you need to have elections, well, you need to have elections. The main task, which I think Lukashenko's regime is facing, is to do everything in their power to try and for those elections to be turning the page from 2020. Which makes the situation different from previous ones is, first of all, this is by no means the first bad non-democratic elections in the country. I mean, we do all know that starting 1994, there were not a single piece of normal elections. But what makes today's situation different is the fact that before that, elections used to be the point of beginning and the end of very periodic cycles of mutual relations of Belarus versus the rest of the world. As in Belarus, people say, and unfortunately that did change before that. The earlier you go, the earlier you sit, because unfortunately, arrests as the political prisoners and illiberalization, all of that was in a 5-year obvious cycle, which was basically focused on elections. In today's situation, elections are merely an element in the attempts of the regime to turn the page. The other element are the geopolitical developments that we are expecting, such as talks on the conclusion of war of Russia against Ukraine. And one more element is discussing the possibility of political prisoners being released versus certain sanctions or relations. Here, elections only become one of the elements of the general attempt to turn the page and to make do with some general elections. They have to be held, and the main thing, I suppose, for the regime is to have them held as quietly, as peacefully, as calmly as possible. Well, to have those elections merely a formality. And so far, judging by the way these elections are organized, this is exactly the process. That it's not even reminiscent of elections. I mean, there is no competition of ideas, there is no electoral campaign as such, even. Dmitry was right to have noted, that makes this campaign different, that even alternative candidates, so-called alternative candidates, finally go for Lukashenko. It is all but amazing, but this is what characterizes these elections in the best way possible. And I suppose that the main addressee of these elections is not the so-called collective West, but rather all those who are ready to listen to the rhetorics of, well, we had elections and now Lukashenko is again legitimate. I mean, first of all, that had a very difficult reactions from the general democratic community. Even before we had those elections, even with that, you had numerous resolutions of international level which failed to see both the process and the conclusions, which were all but obvious. It is also an interesting moment as well, because this attempt to turn the page in relations with the countries of the West, with the democracies, so far it's not working. What's going to happen in relations with other countries? Well, we shall see. I hope I did answer your question, have I? Well, yes. Let us continue on that. I mean, when we mention political prisoners, perhaps, Pavel, what do you think? To what extent is it possible that such issues to be visible after those elections? I mean, what I mean here is also our colleagues, Alias, Vladimir, and others, so that we would understand whether there is some possibility at all here. Well, it seems to me, in order for Lukashenko to let go of the political prisoners and the status of political prisoners, generally, I mean, the laureates of Nobel Prize, Olis Bilatsky, I mean, he is expecting some sort of major preferences in response to such a step. And here, I think I have an idea. The news is bad, both for Lukashenko and for the political prisoners. The democratic world is obviously not ready to give those pseudo-elections a green light, and Lukashenko is obviously soon going to run out of his preliminary releases that he used to demonstrate. I mean, those 250 political prisoners that he allegedly let go, many of whom were sick, many of whom were basically due to be released quite soon. I mean, he had this demonstrative kind of release. He had this demonstrative movement of people being let out, and I'm afraid that after the democratic world demonstrates its resolve, it is fully possible that these point weakenings can come to an end. Okay, thank you. This is naturally rather, dark. It's quite an issue, and it's a massive pity. Well, Dima, I mean, we already have this issue. There's people are being asked about the preliminary vote. I mean, let us return here to our elections, to the process that we are found in. The matter goes on the repressions versus those, repressions versus those who took preliminary voting, for example, who were detained for photo ballots. And I think here it's a matter of those who take photos of the ballots. They are done by those observers who used to send these to their heads of office, or rather people who were forced. They also could take photos of their voting cards just to show that, yeah, they voted right. So I can see the two factors. And the other question, the rather well-known fact of making people go into earlier vote, as we used to have before. Well, let me make a caveat. We are so far gathering information, and what we gathered, I'll try to give it into the general report that we are to publish due Monday. But what pertains to your question, as a matter of fact, we have long since formulated the system of forcing people to do preliminary voting. As I said, pertaining to the choice of signatures, when people were forced to sign under Lukashenko, that was the same for early voting. Now you needn't scare anyone into submission, you just have to say vote. Everyone understands that if they don't, they are in due to be having a lot of trouble. The situation now is that people being fired on those bases are becoming all but obvious. It is quite an issue for a person. Basically, they will never, ever be able to find a job, especially if it is some smaller town or a village. Therefore, even as early as now, we are receiving reports that people are actually forced to give earlier votes, to come vote. It's done with traditional members, with curators of groups at universities, headmasters of schools, of other preconditions. All of them are doing this work, claiming that you have to vote early, that is your duty, blah, blah, blah. And basically, this work is already giving its tangible results. As of 2 days of voting, there were already 17% of all the electoral voters who voted. That's a massive amount, massive. So far as I remember, that's a pure record on early vote. And principally, I think that this campaign is going to be a record holder. And many interesting things are due to happen. We simply have to collect the most interesting facts on the campaign because, well, if before that we used to think there is nothing to amaze us, campaigns usually are held according to some standard procedures of falsification, manipulation, so on and so forth. This one shows that there are places to grow, there are places to fall, rather, And yeah, I hope I did answer your question. We will be collecting all the information that we receive. I'm deeply grateful to those electorals who are not afraid to send those forms to us of informations on violations. We have made it public now, and we try and tell everyone who is going to give us information that they should be doing it very closely and first of all take care of their own safety and security.
Thank you very much, Dima. I can see one more question. I think we can just take it. So it's about ODIHR was invited, but they just turned it down. So could you just answer, more details perhaps? And there's one more question, if you can just go along with that. Which candidates? I've seen your publication on the sprawy wyborów or electoral questions. Was the analysis of candidates, their positions in international terms. Well, actually, those candidates don't have any profile. So who are those candidates actually? What are they talking about when it comes? What are they saying and presenting? Also in the context of, shall I say, cooperation with the West, in the context of Russia, in the context of the war of Russia against Ukraine. So if you could just ask you to talk about it. Okay, so let me just talk about the invitation for OSCE ODIHR. There was no invitation until it appeared less than a week ago. The invitation was absent for such a long time that actually the OSCE ODIHR and the Parliamentary Assembly, they just saw that they saw no possibility of observing those elections since they were not invited. That invitation happened at the beginning of the year. So actually, it was based on the fact that there was no invitation. Roughly a week ago, the Belarusian Ministry of Foreign Affairs made the decision to invite ODIHR to this. Well, the ODIHR said that the procedures actually have not been met, and they don't see a possibility of sending their observers at such a short notice. So actually, I haven't seen that, but we don't know what they were invited to. But the fact is that they were only invited for a brief period of time. So actually, the right decision was made by ODIHR not to send their mission. So that's about the invitation. The next thing, as regards the candidates. Yes, we have performed an analysis of their programs. We had to wait some time until those programs were published, because they were not in a particular hurry to present their program, and actually they were not campaigning so much, but we had to wait a week and a half until we understood what they were in favor of. We have 5 candidates. The Lukashenka program is that everything is all right. It's tough, but it will be even better. So that's the main message. And his main slogan is just vote for us. And basically, I don't know what the program is. Everything's right, but even though it's tough. So there's one interesting component, because you have to turn the page, just forget the differences and live in peace and concord, even though you might disagree on different things. As regards other candidates, one of the candidates presents presents his program in favor of Lukashenko. So it's quite a funny, a strange message when it comes to the campaign. When asked by the journalist Surankov, a communist, he's very fond of Stalin in particular. Well, just an untypical kind of communist of the song. So he said that his goal is to take the second place because a person who takes the second place is more heard than the one who takes a more distant place. So he wants to just talk about in a wiser and even more responsible way. The next candidate, Rubinkiewicz from the Democratic Liberal Party, there is a geopolitical component that Russia is our most important friend and ally. In the next one, Rubinkiewicz, there is actually no program. So it's just enough to mention his last name, but he just exists. He's there. So that's all that we know about him. And Madam Konopatska has an interesting program, a curious program. It looks like a program, except as long as you don't look at the main messages, because it just says that there are two paths in front of the future of Belarus. Belarus, one is towards destruction, and the other one is towards peace and cooperation. So Konopatska presents herself as the main opposition candidate in this campaign, and she says that towards destruction, it's the outside world that is pushing us towards destruction. They wish evil to us. There is an innovative component to the program, but we understand that she will have no odds to win to fulfill that program, because there's no way she can win the elections. So that's it. Those programs don't present any programs of an alternative candidate. There's nothing there that would be criticizing those who are in power at this moment. Those programs only contain the support for the program of the existing power and the pathway presented by Lukashenko. Thank you very much for that presentation. Now we understand what the intrigue is about. We practically have 2 minutes left, so let's ask the last question to everyone. 30 seconds, actually, if you can say what you expect from the 7th term of Aliaksandr Lukashenko in the perspective of the next couple of years. Pavel, if you can just say, start. Well, let me just continue along the topic of the context and the oppressions. I expect further oppression. The authorities started over 5,000 criminal cases each year, and that's not they didn't do it to move towards national concord. I don't see any signals indicating that there are any realistic attempts of the authorities to go towards national reconciliation. I believe that after the extension of Lukashenko's mandate and his powers, actually, I believe that other people might be punished, and so actually the chances to stay free in Belarus are very low. Yes, I agree with Pavel that the oppressions will be continued, although we hope that the authorities, as regards to what Alexander was saying, that Lukashenka was mentioning that you might turn the page. Actually, it might even happen that the authorities, I hope, I'm not saying that it will happen in practice, but indeed, I wish I could maintain the hope that the political prisoners could be set free and the oppressions could be stopped. So actually, it's only my wishes, my hopes. I believe that the authorities will be trying to support the atmosphere of fear so that the society would not even think about that you could anyhow by going to the streets or by meetings, rallies, and or anything that you could change the situation. People are so intimidated that they are afraid about their lives, about their freedom, and those of their near and dear ones. So they don't go to the streets, don't participate in any process. This regards any peaceful meetings or interventions. We don't expect anything like that. The situation is so complex in Belarus that people are basically afraid to do that because they understand how dangerous and pointless it would be to do that. It doesn't mean that everyone agrees with Lukashenko, his policy, and what's going on in the country. There are many critical voices. We talk about it and we receive information from the country. This shows that no one has forgotten. People expect for change to happen sooner or later. They're just afraid of the oppressions. 5 years is a long term. There's also the question of geopolitics, of the possible peaceful agreement or peace treaty between Russia and Belarus and Ukraine. Sorry, and the fact that Lukashenko is holding the elections ahead of time, it might be because he wants to be participating in the process as a legitimate president who has been elected and supported by the nation for another 5 year period, and well, to be legitimized. Interesting, Dima. Alex, I would agree with the colleagues that we don't expect anything particularly good from these elections, especially, I'm sorry, but to a degree, it's a question of where to derive your legitimacy to head the country. Well, actually, the ball is still in Lukashenko's court. They intend to be elected as a legal, legitimate power, legitimate authorities. Well, there might also be another another source of legitimacy. That's the use of power. It might not even be required. So those who hold power in a legitimate, legal way because they've been elected as well, there might be a chance that the level of violence might be reduced. But I'm not expecting for the violence to vanish because everyone in the country understands that there are no reasons, logical or legal, to stay in power. So violence is all that supports them. I can only expect that this violence will be reduced. But I agree with Pavel that they did not initiate the criminal procedures just to close them now. Well, but there's still some hope. But the only hope is that people might want some change because even they understand that it's not moving in the right direction. But we'll just wait and see what happens. But so far, well, nothing much is promising. But some optimists say that, well, biology plays in our favor. Thank you, Alex. Darina, just towards the end, if you could just say.
Нашего отчета про фейковых наблюдателей, так чтобы
If you could just tell us about fake observers. So we'll just add our analysis of fake observers that we'll be publishing when?
We are planning to publish on the Tuesday, 27th January. This a couple of days after the elections. We are hoping that by then we will have seen who came there and who observed, so as to be able to follow the fake observers. Thank you very much. This will also be quite an interesting element to see it from the point of view as to who supports and in what stage they, in what format they support the regime of Aliaksandr Lukashenka. I also wish to remind you all and give my heartfelt thanks to everyone who supports any and all actions by our colleagues such as Alies Bialiatski, Vladimir Lyapkovich, Valentin Stepanovich, Marta Ryabkova, as well as other colleagues who have already spent more than 3 years in prison. I thank you for your support. And we're hoping for the better. Regardless of this rather pessimistic end of our conversation, but still, let us hope for the better, let us think for the better, and just as Alex said, well, biology is on our side. Thank you all. Thank you to the interpreters. We also thank Matthias for everyone who have supported us and who have contributed to the organization of this event. And well, see you soon, hopefully.